Former CIA covert operations officer and president of Diligence LLC, a global intelligence and security firm. Mike, good to have you here. You know, it is important to figure out exactly what happened during the course of this evening. To know what happened and also to prevent it from happening in the future, if at all possible. What do you make of the fact that, you know, over the course of those hours, according to this recent report, they knew that Sean Smith had died, they say of smoke inhalation, around 11 o'clock that night at the consulate. But they said they couldn't find the body of Ambassador Stevens. So there were a few hours over the course of that night when they didn't know where Ambassador Stevens was. They then found his body, according to this new report, around 1:15 in the morning, roughly 6 o'clock, something like that, Eastern time, back here in Washington, D.C. and New York. Then they labeled his body as a John Doe at the hospital there. What does all that tell you?
Well, I mean, obviously there was a great deal of confusion because during the course of this, of course, they were fending off the hostiles. There was a coordinated attack that was being carried out all this time. So the fact that there was confusion, a smoke-filled consulate, they had retrieved the body of Sean Smith, they didn't know where the ambassador was. All of that, yeah, that's fine. But the problem here is that we're getting these details over 8 months after the attack. And the administration continues to just not stand up and say, look, this is what took place. These are the details we have. This is the decision-making process we went through that night. Now, they're saying, okay, fine. They finally got a call on the ambassador's cell phone. It was a pre-programmed number. And they got a call in Tripoli at the embassy there saying, you know, we have a body here. I think you need to come retrieve it. Well, they were concerned that that might be a setup, might be some type of ambush. Okay, well, there's confusion, and clearly they have to be concerned because they knew that hospital facility, you know, was under partial control of hostile elements. So all of that, you know, the fact that they used John Doe as an alias, well, of course they didn't want to bring, you know, to light the fact that this was the ambassador. They wanted to get the body removed from the hospital. So fine, use an alias. But again, the problem isn't these little parts here. The problem is the dereliction of duty at the very beginning of this entire sad story. The fact that we still don't understand why didn't the president stand up and say, we're going to try. I don't know the lives could have been saved. They probably couldn't have.
I think
but you try.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that goes back to this issue of where the president was. And I know the White House doesn't want to, they want people to get off of this topic, you know, but when you look back at September 11th, the original September 11th, as an example, the press wanted to know the details of every single moment of President Bush's activities that day, right? How long he sat and read to the children, exactly where he was in the skies over the United States during those events. And it's just an interesting parallel, because I am struck by the fact you have an ambassador, alive or dead. There's some question about that during the course of those hours, whether he died initially of the smoke inhalation and was then brought to the hospital, or whether he died during that process. It's so sad when you, as you point out, that they found a cell phone on his body and they hit the speed dial number. Hello, we have Ambassador Chris Stevens here. This phone is ringing back to Benghazi. Can you help us? Can you tell us what we should do with this body? So during the course of that, we haven't lost an ambassador in this way in over 30 years in the United States. What is going on back at the White House is a very valid question, is it not?
Well, it is. It absolutely. It's the core of this, and the problem has been. I think the reason why, you know, the White House has been, you know, hoping that this story goes away. They've been obfuscating all this time, and they're happy, I think, to have the email discussions and these little bits and pieces here, because it all takes away from the only point here that's important. And if we simplify this so much, the only way this actually becomes an issue, I think, from the White House perspective, is if the public really gets behind it. If the polls show that this is an issue of concern, I think you have to do that. You have to simplify it and say the only part of this that matters, again, is the dereliction of duty. The commander-in-chief has an obligation to protect American lives overseas. They didn't make the call. They couldn't probably have saved those lives, but they would have had the assets up in the air. And that would have removed this story. We wouldn't be talking about Benghazi if they had simply done their job and tried.
All right, Mike, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much. Mike Baker.